So when you think about the Middle Ages, what's the first image that, pops into your head?
Oh, for almost everyone, it's the same thing. It's that knight in shining armor.
Exactly, this perfect hero. Right. Loyal, brave, almost superhuman, but that can't be the whole story.
Not even close.
So today, let's get into the real facts. How were these knights actually trained? What did they really stand for? And what was their life actually like?
Well, to get that, you have to start with chivalry. And the thing is, it didn't start as some romantic ideal.
It was practical.
Completely.
Mm.
The code chivalry was first just a set of military rules, a practical guide for professional soldiers on horseback whose main job was protecting their lord's land.
So the knight was basically just a highly skilled, very expensive weapon system at first.
Pretty much. But that started to change.
How did we get from paid warrior to this moral icon of society?
That's the huge shift. In the 11th and 12th centuries, these warriors were causing total chaos, just fighting each other constantly.
Right.
So the nobility, and this is key, the church, they both stepped in. They started adding all these moral and social expectations on top of the military stuff.
So it wasn't enough to just be a good fighter anymore.
No. Suddenly, you're expected to be loyal, brave, and, most importantly, to uphold justice, to defend the weak, and protect the church.
They were essentially civilizing this warrior class, turning violence into virtue.
Exactly. And that simple warrior became a member of a higher social class with this huge weight of expectation.
Which means the training to become one must have been intense.
It was grueling, and it started unbelievably early. A noble boy would start as a page at around age 7.
7 years old.
Yep. Sent away from his family to a lord's castle. It was basically a 7-year apprenticeship in manners and discipline.
That sounds incredibly tough for a kid. So they're learning how to serve at the table, court etiquette, hunting, music.
All of that. But the physical prep was already starting. A lot of it was service, cleaning clothes, running messages.
But I'm guessing there was combat training mixed in?
Oh, yeah. They had mock combats, and they spent hours just practicing balance. We know they used a wooden horse, sometimes on a pivot.
To learn how to wield a weapon while staying stable, I assume.
Right, without even relying on stirrups or reins, just pure core strength and balance. It was a non-negotiable skill.
Okay, so if you made it through 7 years as a page, what came next?
At 14, you graduated to become a squire. And this was a huge step up in seriousness.
How so?
A page served the whole castle. A squire served one specific active knight.
Ah, so now it's a direct mentorship.
It's completely hands-on. Your entire life is about your master's combat readiness. Think about it. A suit of plate armor weighed 60 pounds.
60 pounds. That's a full-time job just to maintain.
It was. The squire had to keep it polished, rust-free, do repairs, make sure the war horses were healthy, and even carry extra weapons into battle for his master.
So the key trait for a squire was, what, humility?
Absolute humility and service. You had to put your master's needs completely before your own. This lasted until you were about 21.
Another 7 years.
And you weren't just an assistant. You were in combat, learning tactics, and mastering heraldry.
Heraldry. That's identifying families by the symbols on their shields, right?
Exactly. The colors, the crests. In the chaos of a battle, if you couldn't tell friend from foe instantly, you and your master were dead.
So after 14 years of this, if you prove yourself, you finally get the big promotion.
You get the dubbing ceremony. And this was a massive deal, part spiritual, part political.
I've heard they would pray all night beforehand.
Often, yes. A vigil. They'd wear a white tunic for purity and a red robe to symbolize the blood they were willing to shed.
And the ceremony itself is that famous moment with the sword.
The lord or a senior knight taps them on the shoulder with his sword, and boom, you're officially a knight.
Which gives you the right to lead men, to be called sir.
And you'd get your own gear. Golden spurs, which were the symbol of a mounted warrior, and a new shield with your own coat of arms. It was a huge moment.
Let's talk more about that gear. The armor, we said 60 pounds. That's just immense.
It is, but people misunderstand it a bit. A well-made suit distributed that weight over the whole body, not just on the shoulders.
Still, it must have been difficult to move in.
For sure. If you got knocked down, getting up was a real problem. That's why your squire was so vital. And just mounting the horse required incredible strength.
And the weapons were just as specialized. The main one was the lance.
The longwood lance, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a one-shot weapon for the initial charge.
Ugh.
All about kinetic energy just to knock your opponent off their horse.
And after that one shot.
Then you'd switch to close combat weapons. Heavy swords, of course,
Yeah.
but also things like the mace or the battle axe.
Why a mace? Why not just stick with a sword?
Because a sword couldn't always get through late-stage plate armor. But a mace delivered blunt force trauma, it would crush and break bones under the steel.
Brutal.
War was brutal. All of this was protected by a steel helmet with a visor and, of course, that shield with your identity on it.
So when they weren't at war, how did they stay sharp? That's where tournaments come in.
Exactly. Yeah. Tournaments in jousting were not just for fun. They were massive military exercises, but also huge entertainment for the nobility.
Like the Super Bowl of the Middle Ages.
That's a great way to put it. And the main event, jousting, was pure spectacle.
Two knights riding at each other full speed, trying to break a lance on the other's shield.
And the prizes were no joke. It wasn't just about glory.
Right. It was economic.
Pure economics.
Yeah.
You could win money, horses, or even the defeated knight's entire suit of armor, which was worth a fortune.
So if you lost, it was a financial disaster.
Devastating. And even with rules, a lot of knights were seriously injured or even killed. The line between sport and war was very, very thin.
Which brings us back to the rules. The church was trying so hard to create a moral framework for these guys. Why did they care so much?
Social control, really. The knightly class was just so violent and unstable. The church spiritualized chivalry to try and rein them in.
How did they do that?
They made knights take oaths to protect non-combatants, clergy, peasants. They called it the peace and truce of God. They'd bless their weapons, making the knight feel like an instrument of God's will.
So a knight's job description suddenly included religious duties?
Big time. They were pushed to go on crusades, on pilgrimages, and at home, they were supposed to help the poor and widowed, to be the protectors of the vulnerable.
And then there's that other famous concept, courtly love.
Ah, yes. A very different kind of code. This was a social idea demanding total respect and devotion to noble ladies.
But it wasn't really about marriage, was it?
Not at all. A knight would pick a lady, usually a married woman of higher status, and perform great deeds in her name. He might wear her colors in a tournament.
It sounds very formal and distant.
It was. Courtly love was almost always an admiration from afar. It wasn't meant to be consummated. The real purpose was to civilize these rough, tough warriors.
To make them practice gentleness and good manners.
Exactly. It helped polish the fighter into a gentleman. This is really where the image of the knight in shining armor comes from.
So you have this ideal, right? The hero from the King Arthur stories, fighting dragons, finding the Holy Grail. But the stories exaggerated things, didn't they?
Massively. The gap between that ideal and the reality of medieval war is just huge.
At the end of the day, they were professional killers.
That was their job. Winning battles, taking land, not searching for holy relics. And when it came to war, chivalry often went right out the window.
You see accounts of them burning crops, destroying villages.
Absolutely. Scorched earth tactics. Chivalry really only seemed to apply if you were fighting another knight of your own social class.
And even then, there was a catch.
A huge one. The main goal was to capture wealthy opponents alive. Not for mercy, but for ransom. A rich nobleman's ransom could make you wealthy overnight. Peasants, on the other hand, were usually just killed.
Which all comes back to the money. Being a knight was just incredibly expensive.
An unbelievable economic burden. The armor and horses alone could cost as much as a small house today.
So how did they afford it?
A feudal system. A lord would grant a knight a manor, a piece of land.
And the knight would collect taxes and rent from the peasants working that land.
That's what paid for everything. Your gear, your horses, your squires. If you lost your equipment or your land, you were ruined. Your status was gone.
This financial pressure was constant.
It was immense. And it's why knighthood was such an exclusive club. Very few could afford the startup costs, let alone the 14 years of unpaid training.
But this whole system, this reliance on expensive, heavy cavalry, it couldn't last forever.
No. And technology was the main reason it ended. The first major blow was the longbow.
A simple weapon, but deadly.
Incredibly. A common foot soldier could now shoot an arrow that could pierce plate armor from a distance. Suddenly, your 60-pound suit wasn't a fortress. It was a heavy liability.
It changed the whole dynamic of the battlefield.
It did. But the final nail in the coffin was gunpowder.
Cannons.
Cannons and early handguns. They made stone castles and metal armor almost obsolete.
Armor could be shot through, castle walls could be knocked down.
Right. And kings started to realize they didn't need this complicated feudal system anymore. It was easier and more reliable to just hire professional standing armies of infantry.
And just like that, the military need for the knight was gone.
It vanished. Knighthood became mostly a ceremonial title, a social status, rather than a military reality.
So the age of the armored warrior came to an end. But it's interesting, the ideals, the code of chivalry, bravery, service, those ideas survived.
They absolutely did. They
Really?
still shape our ideas about good manners and helping others today, which leaves a really interesting final question for you to think about.
What's that?
When you look at why the Age of Knights ended, which do you think was the single biggest factor? Was it the crushing economic pressure, the constant need for money and land, or was it simply the unstoppable force of new technology, like the longbow and the cannon?
A tough one to think about. Good luck with your studies.